All right, let's switch our attention now to labour law. And the Department of Employment and Labour has just gazetted the new Code of Good Practice on Dismissal. It's been said, or it is said, to be the most significant change to workplace discipline and dismissal law in decades. Apparently, it affects every employer and employer in the country, from retrenchments to misconduct, cybercrime to cannabis. So let's find out what's changing and what it means for business. Labour law expert John Botha is with me, Joint Chief Executive Officer of Global Business Solutions. John, always good talking to you. Let's dive straight in. What exactly has changed, and why is it described as the biggest shift in dismissal law since 1995?
Jeremy, good day to you and to the listeners. I would summarize it in 3 points. It is an absolute material shift. Firstly, it seeks to decriminalize the previous provisions of law in respect of dismissals. And when we say decriminalize, Jeremy, it means disciplinary inquiries to be less focused on criminal law procedures, which is not good for anyone, which breaks down relationships, quite frankly, and is very adversarial. They want to move away from that, so they call it decriminalization. The second one is to modernize the provisions of disciplinary codes and the like, because the world's moved on. You know, we need to cater for poppy, we need to cater for cannabis, we need to cater for social media. I mean, just take a look at social media and the impact on the workplace in the United States with those events that have been unfolding. And then the final one, which to me is very encouraging, is to humanize the process, because the truth of the matter is the codes refer to genuine dialogue. And Jeremy, so often organizations go straight into discipline or straight into performance management, and the task might very well be addressed, but the connection with the person is lost.
John, retrenchments, as I understand it, and you'll help me here, have now become more formalized. Does this make restructuring harder or just more transparent?
My personal view is that it codifies it, which would align with your transparency assertion, Jeremy. So the truth of the matter is, for the first time, the Code of Practice pulls together 3 types of dismissal. So there are only 3 ways to dismiss someone. Misconduct, which means they've been naughty, it's their fault, they need to be disciplined. The second one is incapacity, they want to work, but they're not capable. And then the third one is operational requirements, where technology, economic, and structural factors business. So what it's done is it's pulled operational requirements into the mix, and it's given a much more codified, template-based approach, so that organizations and employers that are looking to restructure are less uncertain in respect of what they need to include in that process.
John, as you alluded to a little earlier, the code moves away from a so-called punitive model. What does a dialogue-driven approach actually look like in practice?
Well, Jeremy, it's going to take a mindset shift for a lot of colleagues and a lot of organizations. But if you picture a disciplinary inquiry, I've given you a notice to attend a disciplinary, Jeremy. You've had 48 hours notice, a very formal document telling you the serious allegations, sets them out in extreme detail, says that these are your rights to representation, call, cross-examine witnesses. For 2 nights, at the very least, for 2 days, you've been stressing, anxiety's been building, it affects your private life. The day arrives, now there's a chairperson. Chairperson says, please identify yourself. What is your role? These are the allegations. How do you plead? Now, you can only imagine by that time, the relationship and the anxiety that's been embedded is just unbelievable. I've seen people in disciplinary inquiries literally shaking because they're so nervous. So genuine dialogue would almost be saying, listen, there's certain legal rights which will always be there. For example, the right to representation, the right to lead evidence. But the way in which you do it and the time periods associated with that can be brought into a more humane space. So it's more like saying, Jeremy, on the 14th of September, you arrived late without permission. Let's talk about it. Here's your manager. He was put in a very difficult position. What do you say about it? Are you prepared to toe the line? And the issue of remorse, Jeremy, has also come in. So the codes are saying if an employee shows genuine remorse of their own volition, you really have to think hard before you dismiss.
John, tell me, what are the most immediate risks for employers who now don't update their policies?
My personal view is I don't think there are any legal risks. In fact, they're probably going to be a bit better off for the next few years, because you can imagine the CCMA commissioners, the judges in the Labour Court, they've all got to get used to this new sort of fourth industrial revolution-based approach, if you want to call it that, a more humanitarian and less legalistic approach. But I think the biggest losers are the organizations themselves, Jeremy, because they suspend people for sometimes days or weeks on full pay pending a disciplinary, costs a lot of money. They destroy relationships because if I don't dismiss you, I'm still going to carry on working with you. Now we've just come out of this sort of symbolic UFC ring, and we've been fighting. And I think organizations stand to lose a lot of agility and flexibility and really to build a stronger culture.
And surely the compliance burden is going to be more difficult, very steep for SMEs without in-house HR.
Well, you're spot on. I mean, the brand new section in the code that has been totally inserted as a brand new section is small businesses. Unfortunately, they don't define small businesses, Jeremy, but for all intents and purposes, we'll say around 50 or less employees. And they've really diluted the procedural and the detailed administrative obligations. They sort of say some companies don't have human resources departments. They don't have access to experts. Why do you need them to comply with these very high standards of other organizations?
I'm going to leave it there, and thank you so much, John, for the explanation. That's labour law expert John Botha, Joint Chief Executive Officer of Global Business Solutions.